Welcome to another Figure Week, Hard Surface Week, Organic Week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Sticking with you as always through these troubling times. I hope wherever you guys are, you're staying safe and creative as always. Thanks again to people who have been joining the Discord and have been putting in suggestions for guests. I'm actively working on that as always and trying to get people on the show that I think you would enjoy. Recently we've been trying to branch out slightly away from maybe just art-centric focused within the podcast and get people in who come from maybe different walks of life or have different jobs or different things going on in their lives that are still related to the entertainment industry but are maybe not specifically related to art, as we kind of started out. Today's guest is one of those people, someone who came through multiple recommendations, and people who also said it would be a great chance to talk to them and get an insight into specifically the studio that they are currently working at and are co-founded, but also the Scottish Games Network in general and how that has definitely bloomed over the last couple of years and exploded, and put a kind of focus on specifically what's going on in this small part of the world, because I think as we were recently talking about, people kind of dismay or just put away that the fact that games are made here, there is studios here as well, so especially where this is based. So today we are talking to Mr. Douglas Hare. Hey Doug, how's it going?
I'm well, thanks.
Awesome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, of course. Now, Doug, you have a really impressive title. I think more impressive than most people that have been on the podcast so far. But you are one of the co-founders of Outplay Entertainment. Yes.
That's correct. I'm co-founder and CEO.
Yes. So, if you guys don't know, I'm sure Doug will tell you. But if you can give us a brief summary, what is Outplay Entertainment?
Outplay is a mobile-first developer. We company was co-founded in 2010. We raised our first. We're venture capital backed, so we raised money in December 2010. Opened a studio in Dundee in April 2011, and I've been making free-to-play games for mobile ever since.
Fantastic, yeah. And that's obviously now, just a little over 10 years you guys have been doing that. And I think it's always incredible to look back at the span of stuff you've created and the things you've taken on. Do you feel like it's crazy looking back now that it's been 10 years? Do you still feel like it's just that the company's just started?
I mean, in reality, we're almost 12 years. It's 18 months since 11 years since we opened the studio, and so no, I mean, it's a sort of strange, and obviously and that's been affected by the lockdown. I think that's changed everyone's perception of time. But I've trying to account for that. It's still been a pretty crazy journey, and we're trying to sort of imagine sort of Richard and I in April 2011 opening up the office and just having a bunch of IKEA tables in there that we'd assembled and cobbled together some Wi-Fi and started inviting people into the office. It was definitely from the business I co-founded before.
Right.
Coming back and starting from scratch again was definitely, a challenging, interesting ride.
I could imagine. Yeah, especially in Scotland, because I think, as we were talking kind of before we started recording, that people, think Scotland, especially within the game sector, they really automatically always go to Rockstar North. And, like we said, they're one of the biggest, but I think there's so many small gems dotted around that do incredible work that people, don't know about, and I think Outplay is one of them. Although you guys obviously have been making huge traction over the last couple of years, and I think one of the biggest announcements I saw on Twitter at one point when I really started to get on your radar was when you guys had kind of paired with Angry Birds and you were doing a mobile game based on that stuff as well, and the Gordon Ramsay stuff. It just seems that you've kind of hit these big, huge IPs over the last couple of years. That's been incredible, right?
Yeah, I mean, Angry Birds is crazy. That's 9 years ago that we actually launched that game, and that was a really serendipitous moment for the company. We had just built a new bubble shooter type game, and I happened to be out at E3 the summer before, sort of showing it to some people, saying, "Hey, look, our new game, we're about to launch it, soft launch it." And and there was people from Rovio, and they said, "Oh my God, that would make an amazing Angry Birds game." And we flew out to Espoo and Finland, spoke to the team there, said, "You know what? Actually, it would make a really great Angry Birds game." So for 6 months, the team totally redid the game, sort of picked it apart and put back together as an Angry Birds title, Angry Birds Pop. Right. It was done as a joint venture. So we weren't getting paid to do it. We did it because we thought there was going to be a great opportunity in terms of the revenue for the revenue share.
Right.
And we were right. It ended up being the biggest success in terms of revenue for the company to date, and one of the biggest successes for Rovio in free to play. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I mean, even the Gordon Ramsay thing as well, was that a similar thing that came about? Were you just in the area of like a games conference and then something else had happened similar? Or did you directly talk to Gordon Ramsay at that point?
That's that one came about, just as a result of a developer, a Chinese developer, the publisher that had the rights to do something, didn't have a team to do it, approached us about doing it, and we said, well, we'll publish it in the West, and you guys can publish it in Asia,
right?
And that's what happened. And we've had a really, it's not like I'm friends with Gordon or anything, but he's been remarkably easy and very sort of generous for this time working with him, and we've just really enjoyed that relationship.
Fantastic, yeah. So I mean, like talking about this big IPs now, they've came over the last couple of years, and that's been a huge thing for Outplay. But what was the thinking behind launching a mobile game studio in Scotland at the time? Probably at that time, even knowing the competition and what was back then, because even back in 2010, the landscape looks very different now with indie developers and small studios that are propped up in Dundee. But back then, was it as busy? Did you feel like you had a space you could slot into?
So I mean, the Richard, my brother and co-founder, and I
Mm,
lived in the US for 16, 17 years, and during the time we were out there, we co-founded a developer with a friend from England uh,
mhm,
called The Collective, and we bootstrapped that company and started getting gigs, making bigger and bigger projects, and
mhm,
slowly but surely developed a reputation for working on big IP. So Star Trek, Buffy, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, games like that, as well as trying to do original games.
right.
And in 2006, we merged that. 2005, we merged that with another developer and became the biggest independent developer in the West. And we grew that. 2006, we sold a majority stake to a private equity company.
Mhm,
We grew that. We acquired a number of companies. And in 2008, we were a really massive 850 person, 13 studio developer.
wow.
Um, and we got a launch game, a day one launch title on the App
Mhm,
Store, and that was a really pivotal moment in my career in terms of leading that effort, where I thought, here's the most perfect opportunity for people who want to build games and take them direct to market. They don't want to have a publisher; they just want to make their games and have an audience there.
right.
And that sort of moment changed it for me in terms of I'm going to leave the company that I co-founded and
Mhm,
start another company that's just simply focused on mobile games.
right. Yeah.
And that's sort of how the journey began. And then when Richard and I sort of started looking at the types of game that we were going to build, we realized that free to play was what we wanted to do. And
Right.
that, when you're doing free to play games, it means there's kind of no end to them.
Yeah.
You're always adding new features, you're always adding new content, and
Mhm,
that meant that we really were starting to look at, well, now we're going to need to start building up a team again that we can have reliability around. And when we looked around in Southern California and California in general, there really weren't that many developers making mobile games and making Facebook games. We were also very interested in the social side of things. And we'd had ongoing conversations with SDI, Scottish Development International, for
mhm,
years about potentially opening up a studio in Scotland. And
right.
so we went back to them and said, hey, you know what? We're maybe thinking that California is not the place for us to start this new business up.
Right.
Maybe Scotland would be. And so we flew out, met with a bunch of people, other developers, and Dundee in particular. And there's people making mobile games, there's people making social, Facebook
Mhm,
games. And so it felt like there was actually more people kind of in the mix on that stuff then than
right.
there was around us in California. So that kind of made the decision for us.
Yeah. I mean, great for Scotland, obviously, because Outplay has also provided many jobs and opportunities to people in Scotland. And you guys have obviously put another mark on the Scottish map for developer. So it's also highlighted that because I think we were talking about this other day about the SNP and how Sturgeon has talked about she really wants to make Scotland itself a tech hub and a place where developers can feel happy to come to and start up businesses and start up development places. I mean, we've definitely seen it within even the film sector the last couple of years, right? That Glasgow and
Uh,
Edinburgh have exploded with filming and people coming here to film big Hollywood budget films. Do you think that the way Scotland's evolved over the last 10 years, the sector for gaming will continue to expand?
yeah, I think I see no reason why not. I mean, you look, all you need is um, another pretty significant success,
Hmm.
and that could be from us, it could be from another developer. But the way I look at it is a comparison I have is with Finland, which
Right.
is home to some of the biggest developers, certainly in mobile.
Yeah.
Supercell, multi-billion, valuation business.
Yep.
That would be transformational for Scotland. I mean, for
Of
the
course.
UK to have a developer of that kind of scale.
Eyes, yeah.
And there's no reason, there's nothing preventing it happening.
Yeah.
You
No,
know, it's
definitely.
not, it's a 5 million, circa 5 million population country with not dissimilar, arguably worse weather than we have. And, so there is no reason.
That it wouldn't happen, of course.
And when you look at other opportunities for Scotland to have those
Mhm.
kinds of, that sort of size of business,
Yeah.
it feels like, games is a very, very credible opportunity.
Of course, no, agreed. And I think that people also, again, as we kind of hit on this kind of broken record, but with Rockstar North, I think one of the problems we see that, or I see, is that the fact that, Take Two Interactive own names, so not all of the money that is generated there goes back into Scotland's funds to kind of build that. I mean, I don't know too much about the studio. I couldn't speak on it, of course. But then I think with you guys being primarily, you bound and built in Scotland, and, you guys have kind of started that whole thing in Dundee. And, it's one of these things where I think that there's maybe not as many Scottish run studios in Scotland. There's some studios that are maybe doing great things, but I think even the guys that work on Microsoft who are based in Dundee again are from, they're run from Microsoft. So there's definitely a collab in those two studios, and that they go back and forth. And obviously some of it goes back to Scotland, but there's not too many huge. I say Scotland, but I mean, I know Rockstar started as DMA, so that was a Scottish studio, and that has never flourished into Rockstar. But yeah, you know what I mean. Like, I feel like Outplay is one of the shining examples of people who have came from Scotland, are in Scotland, have founded in Scotland, and are a Scottish studio. If that makes sense, do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, I think we've got UK investors. The primary investor is Pentec, which is a Scottish VC, and we've got, and alongside the money that they put in initially, it's the Scottish government put money in. So we've got Scottish government money in us, in the business as well. So it's very definitely got Scotland is very heavy in its DNA. That's
The roots, yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, speaking about now, obviously, how you guys are running day to day, I mean, it's very different. And obviously, we've talked about COVID. We might touch on that at one point. But when you guys started out, what were some of the biggest hurdles you had apart from funding? I mean, that would be probably one of the biggest, right? Because you need money to do things. But was something like sourcing talent, for instance, was that something also that you struggled to?
Yeah, that's just a background challenge that's existed in the industry for years, and is arguably even tougher now.
Right.
Because you have, not only do you have just the ongoing success of the games industry, you have quite a lot of sort of adjacent industries that sort of need similar talent. So you have like fintech,
Right.
and competing for engineering or user interface and UX people and art.
Yeah.
You've got crypto, coming in with outrageous amounts of money, looking to sort of start building games around crypto related technologies. So it's definitely, and just generally tech. There's just lots of tech, and so there's definitely we were able to hire. When we first opened the studio, there was a sufficient number of people that were interested in the business within, what we were setting out to do. They were able to hire the sort of core team relatively locally, quite quickly.
Right.
But since that, then, and we've been very sort of strict on not headhunting. We don't poach from other. We just think from an ecosystem perspective that it's unhealthy to just have people all sort of
moving between constantly.
Musical chairs within a small, relatively small environment. So that's just been we've tended to sort of seek talent from everywhere really in the UK and then beyond, and so as a consequence of that, we've had for years now a very, very sort of diverse team. We've had for years over 20 nationalities, working in the studio, and that's only increased in terms of headcount since we all started working entirely remotely, and we actually just literally hire people. We're not even relocating some people. They're not interested in relocating for one reason or another, and that's fine. They can work in France or they can work in Spain, and they'll still be an outplayer, but they'll not be in or around Dundee.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, COVID has definitely presented challenges, and I think if we look at the silver lining and anything that's happened, that the remote working now has exploded, and studios are now learning that going fully remote or using partly remote is also a way of the future that you don't have to be moving countries to work with certain developers. And I think especially like even just one of the guys I knew recently who works now for Respawn in California, but they obviously are based in London, but he was happy just to stay there, and so were they. So, there's definitely opportunity abound for people who want to work in the games industry but don't or can't move country for whatever reason, whether it be visa issues or anything, financially. Yeah,
No, it's
you're going to see
definitely,
something. Yeah.
it's definitely, I think we've been pretty progressive about it, within 2 weeks of it. I mean, there was no, like pretty much everyone else, it's not as though we'd had any sort of dress rehearsal for working
Yeah.
remotely. It was like, I think we're going to have to start working remotely. It looks like we're going to go into lockdown. All
Yeah.
right. Hey, everyone, we're going to go, we're working remotely as of next week, And, aside from some sort of hardware, furniture, sort of webcam type niggles and getting them sorted out for everyone when they were like finding hen's teeth,
Mm.
it all kind of worked pretty well.
Yeah.
And and then we've only been able to we've refined that over the course of the last
A few
2
years. Yeah.
months. And so, but within a few weeks, we had already started. I'd sort of, company meetings that said, "Hey, just so you know, we're never going back to 9 to 5,
Yeah.
5 days a week." And then
Right.
after that, we said, "Hey, just so you know, we're just really likely that we'll be offering a pretty much hybrid solution for forever." And then
Right.
the most recent thing that we said was that it's maximally flexible hybrid. If work where you feel you're going to be able to do your best work, and if that's always at home, that's fine. If it's always in the office, that's fine. And if it's somewhere in between,
That's
that
fine as
we'll,
well.
we'll, we'll facilitate that. And so it's. I mean, I think and I started saying that early on that during the pandemic, obviously before we knew how long it was going to last,
Mhm.
that that there will be silver linings, and one of them is the quality of life for
Mm.
people, the reduction in environmental impact of having people
Commuting.
traipsing back and forward to an office
Yep.
so that they can do exactly the same work, potentially in a worse environment than they could do by just staying at home.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely. And I think that's been one of the things that, I mean, we were just talking to other, my partners from the Netherlands, and they were talking about how Netherlands has just made it a law, a basic human right now, that working from home is a human right. So, I mean, now that that's championed, I'm hoping that the rest of Europe might follow suit. But, it's difficult now with Brexit as well because we don't really follow the same curve.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's definitely made things work-wise more difficult as well
I,
for
I
people
think
getting
I think
involved.
it's the type of thing that doesn't actually really require legislation, because I think that it becomes something where it's untenable as more and more companies offer environments that are that have that much that kind of consideration around welfare and ultimately productivity and so on.
Yep.
How can you compete? If we've already talked about talent, recruitment being one of the biggest challenges.
Yep.
If you've got two companies, and one's saying, we need you in the office 3 days a week for absolutely no good reason at all. And
Right.
there's another that's saying, oh, no, you don't have to do that.
Come in the office, yeah.
Then unless there's some crazy other, some other reason, then you're going to go
Right,
with
yeah.
one that allows you that flexibility,
Of course, yeah.
and once you've had that flexibility,
You
and
don't
know
want to
that
give it
you
up.
are effective, it's really quite a struggle to mentally say, no, I really want to go back to being in the office.
No, we were talking about this the other day, fun enough, in my Discord server, where I don't want to name the specific company, but they recently put out something on LinkedIn that was shared where they had a system where depending on the severity of the project, people would have to come back in either 3, 4, or 5 days a week. And funny enough, I've seen other recruiters now making fun of that post because they're like, well, why would you not just come work with us where we offer fully remote?
Well, let's look at the language there, right?
Yeah.
According to the severity, you're sort of
Mhm.
going, right. So if it's turned into a shit show, and we need you in the office more as well. It's not even like it's 5 days a week, but it's a really good time in the project.
Yeah.
It's 5 days a week when things are at their worst.
Worst. God almighty. Yeah, I mean, VFX in general, I think, has always been that kind of way. But yeah, definitely, I think the way they've used the acronym as well, it's never really lended itself as well to be a positive spin. But yeah, but then like you say, people are now taking it. Like ILM was one of the first to come out and say, come work for us because you don't want to go through this. But it is just throwing people to the wind. And funny enough, I've seen one or two people from that company up and throw a resignation letter in since they saw that. So I mean, it's not doing anything positive for them. But yeah, I think remote is one of these things that it needs to be offered as, I think just modern working. Just it seems crazy now when we look back that it wasn't something we were doing earlier. I think it was.
No,
Yeah.
I think there was clearly movement in that direction, but it was glacial, and I think the sort of pandemic
Mhm.
sort of accelerated, 5 to 10 years of change, gradual change into 6 months or something like that.
Yeah. All at once. Yeah. I mean, it's even the thing where the UK government at one point, well, they do a lot of things great, but one thing they were talking about or championing was the 4-day week, and trying to offer that to people and companies around the UK if they wanted to also incorporate that into their system. And I think it's getting one of these things where I'm hoping, like you say, the work-life balance is now going to be a priority where people will not have to live at their work constantly or have a thing where they have to choose between, working comfortably in a company and then also,
Yeah, there's going to be
accelerating their career.
there's going to be some industries that there's types of industry that simply have to be people, that's just the job.
Yep.
But for industries like ours,
Mhm.
where without any practice, without any research, with nothing, we can spend 2+ years making games, keeping live games going,
Yep.
coming up with ideas, having creative, all of that. There's definitely things that benefit
Mhm.
from social interaction, and what how we've still got an office. We've got
Mhm.
2 units in the Vision Building in Dundee,
Yep.
and what we're doing now is we're just sort of like just testing things. It's like as more people slowly start wanting to spend a bit more time in the office, it's like, what are the things that are going to be the most valuable? What you want to have is a situation where you've created a reason or reasons and a space, an environment that people want to go into the office.
Mhm.
It's not about forcing people into the office. It's
Right.
about making reasons and an environment that people want to go into the office. And
Yeah.
those are two very different things with two very different outcomes. We're not looking to say, hey, we want people to come into the office so they can put their headphones on and do heads down work.
Right.
That's just do that at home,
Yeah, of course.
But if people want to come in and do a retrospective on something, grab some lunch,
Yep.
do a build review where you can all be kind of there's certainly there's advantages to that that are real, and that anyone can perceive. We had our first. We used to do quite a lot of parties before the lockdown, before we all started working remotely,
Mhm.
and we had that kind of just there's multiple big parties throughout the course of the year,
Mhm.
and lots of people with sort of social activities, doing things, playing football, going Monroe bagging, whatever, lots of different things going on at any one time, and we had our first in-person get together at scale a few weeks back, and went to a sort of big activity center. We had I think we had about 95 people out of the company. The company's about 130.
Right.
We had about 95 that got together,
Mhm.
and we flew people in from wherever they were. If they were far away, a lot of them stayed for 3, 4, 5 nights, and got to hang out with their teams properly. In many cases,
Brilliant.
for some people, the first time. But we were all there, divided up into teams at
Mhm.
an activity center, throwing axes, building rafts,
Yeah.
doing combat archery and whatnot. And then
Fantastic.
after that, off to a pub and just hanging out together.
Right.
And it was just great,
Yeah.
And it wasn't like everyone thought that, and everyone was keen to say how much they thought it was great. So
Yeah.
I think there's just so much sort of fatigue or trauma that's been endured during the whole pandemic
Of
that
course.
people have kind of forgotten. Actually, it can be really good fun when you get it together. So I think it's just going to take a wee while. I think it'll be slowly but surely. And the way we're thinking about the business is to make it so that people actually want to spend time because they feel there's value.
Yeah. No, 100%. And you've touched on a lot of good points there on just general making people want to come in and things like that. It's stuff you don't really think about. I mean, unless you're running a company like you are, then, how do we get people into the office and make it exciting for them? And versus, people have to come to the office because it's their job. And I think I would love the fact that more companies think like that, because I definitely have heard the opposite, right? Horror stories of people that we just talked about who are getting dragged in the office because it's just a thing where, they want people back in the office, but for what reason, why are they doing it? But yeah, I think it's a good attitude, because then it hopefully sets an example for other people within the sector that, well, Outplay's doing this, why is other people not doing this? And it's like you said, then the whole, the approach of like people wanting to work at companies, well, if they, company A offers this and company B offers this, so it's very good, definitely. So, I mean, you guys are doing the pandemic now, but I mean, looking back in the last 2 years, apart from remote working, obviously, what was other challenges you found within development? Was it still the same making games, or was there a lot of difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's making games is hard. I think that fundamentally making games is hard. You also have the challenges specific to the mobile part of the industry, where Apple made changes to deprecate IDFA and introduced their own some more limited form of tracking that has a real impact in terms of people's ability to market effectively. And that created definitely a lot of challenges, and still creates a lot of challenges. So I mean, it's a tough industry. It's an incredible industry, but it's not easy. And it's not like an industry where, all right, I've got the hang of this now. I just do this over and over again. But by the time you kind of feel comfortable with one part of it, it'll change, and then you have to start again. And so it is and you're dealing with technology, you're dealing with creative, it's a really sort of heady mix. Is hard to get right.
Yeah. And the pandemic didn't help that. Obviously, it just made it even harder, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, now you've probably taken lessons from the last 2 years and looked back on the struggles you had and how obviously the studio has evolved with remote working. Is there a way you kind of look at the future now? Do you think there's certain things that you have in your kind of goal line of like what you want to hit, or how you want the studio to maybe shift in the next couple of years?
I think we're always pursuing sort of greater success. I think you want to have I think one of our sort of goals outside of commercial success, your business commercial success is always there. But I think sort of ubiquity of one of our games. You can sort of think of things like Angry Birds or Candy Crush or Clash of Clans. Where it just is known about by vast swathes of the population. And I remember the first time I got on a plane, I think coming back from London, and as I was walking down the aisle, there was someone sitting playing one of our games.
Mhm.
I remember it was just like, that's brilliant. Just actually
Yeah,
seeing people out in the wild playing your game. And it's happened many times since, but it's never been quite the level of just people playing your game everywhere. It's just this stuff
like kind of AAA console
phenomenon.
stuff. Yeah. Just like AAA console stuff, like you're not really competing in that market where that's like mass appeal, like stuff like Call of Duty, Fortnite, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in those games, the thing is, although Call of Duty and things like Fortnite, although they're massively popular, they're in terms of audience, they're still a fraction of the audience of people that are playing, Candy Crush or playing,
Of course, yeah, 100%.
So that's what I'm talking about. It's like, people, how do you get a game that's got 200 million people playing it a month? It's that kind of thing, and we've yet to reach that, and that's definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah, on the tick. Yeah. I even saw. I mean, recently I was talking to a friend at King who was there in Sweden, and they were heading up the department that launched the Crash Bandicoot mobile game.
Yeah.
I think it was the Crash Run game, which was one I was trying to kind of pick at the time and get into, but then of course the pandemic hit, so everything kind of closed down. But then they've obviously success with that and entering the 3D space, because traditionally always the King were doing more 2D stuff, at the time with Candy Crush and other games. So Is that a space you're also looking to venture into in the future? Do you think that like 3D is something you would want to envision?
I mean, well, from a background perspective, I basically have spent most of my life working on 3D console games.
Right.
So that is certainly something that, as a person involved in making games, I've had a lot of experience with. Certainly not latterly, but if you look at, uh, one of our games, Booty Quest, that
Right.
had real-time 3D environments.
Right.
With Castle Creeps, Tower Defense,
Right.
that all had 3D characters in there in real time. A lot of our games have real 3D assets, but just not real time. But we've
Right.
also
Okay.
got games that have real time. So yeah, there's 3D art is used throughout our games, both static and dynamic. We're working on another game right now. We've got two games right now that actually are significant amounts of real-time 3D in them in comparison. So
Right. Grand. Fantastic. Yeah.
so yeah, we've always had sort of riggers, modelers, animators. They've always been in the business. It's just it's less evident.
Of course, no, definitely. I mean, one of these things I think with Outplay that's great is the fact that you have such a diverse range of games, right? There's not just like the tower defense isn't all you do, right? That's just the one type of game. Like you guys have, multiple games over multiple different genres, that
Yeah.
have different probably teams involved in each game that do different things. So I mean, it's great that Outplay has such a broad spectrum within the games industry and what they do. I mean, it's like, because typically with a studio, you'd have one type of game, you do that forever. You just do sequels and sequels and sequels until,
Yeah, I mean, and we've had, we've ended up spending more time in, the sort of what you would consider casual um, domain puzzle games, casual puzzle
Mhm.
games like, Match 3, Match 2, Bubble Shooters. It's definitely where we've had our greatest success, and I've launched the main titles. But if you look at the sort of history of the company,
Mhm.
um, there's been sort of like that as a sort of spine, if you will, for the business, and then and that's frequently had things going on in parallel. Whereas alongside it, running in serial fashion has
Right.
been more experimental games. I mean, one of the first earliest games is a game called Monster Legacy, and that was a sort of Zelda meets Monster Hunter, Pokemon
Right.
slash Farmville type thing. And it was our first game to get Editor's Choice from Apple,
Oh, wow.
and got us nominated for a Scottish BAFTA alongside GTA 5, which I
Wow.
think we can all figure out which one won. Um, and but that was sort of like the start of, then we did Alien Creeps,
Mhm.
then we did Castle Creeps,
Mhm.
then we did another game, Castle Creeps Battle, which was a sort of Clash of Clans style game in the in the Castle Creeps universe.
Right.
And so there's always had that kind of bit of experimentation in different styles of genre,
Mhm.
generally more mid-core. Um, and then we do Facebook instant games. We've done word games. So there is a lot of we've done hyper casual games.
Mhm.
So there's a fair amount of experimentation, and I think even the word casual now, what casual represents as a canvas for creativity, is actually a really pretty broad canvas now.
Yeah.
You can make games that are really actually fairly hardcore, but using casual mechanics.
Right.
So it doesn't feel that limiting to say, casual, which in some people's heads might mean that they just think you're doing a match 3 game. And
Right. Of course. No, I mean, like even I mean, the thing I think about the automatically is the fact that Riot has now put most of their league stuff on mobile as well. Like I mean, they definitely have games that are now mobile eccentric, and I mean, even with Blizzard as well. I mean, they kind of launched Hearthstone way back in the day on mobile, and that's been a huge a success as well as a card game and everything like that. So yeah, there's a whole.
The new Diablo game's
Oh,
done.
Immortal, of course, just launched. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's a huge. Like you said, it's a hardcore game, but with slightly a casual approach in the fact that the control system, the way you earn loot, you travel between places. So it's definitely built for the casual audience in the sense that they don't want to sit at their PC and play it. But yeah, it's incredible to see now the leaps and bounds that mobile gaming is now taken versus like where the console space was a couple of years ago. And
Well, it's actually really so blurry. I mean, the evolution of the hardware. If you look at console generations, were sort of typically sort of 5 to 7 years, and so you'd have your generation come out. Everyone would make generally pretty bad games
Yep.
for worse generally than the best games that came out of the prior generation.
Yep.
Then they figured out what they were doing and started making really good games. And then just as you were making the best games, then
it changes again.
but that 5 to 7 years was where you saw the big leaps in console. Certainly, obviously in PC there was a bit more continuous in that. But that was how the pace of sort of development, if you will, or whereas on mobile it's kind of all happening all the time. I mean, even just looking at iOS or Apple, iPhone, you're getting a new generation of hardware every year.
Yep.
You're getting new business models introduced, on a fairly continuous basis. So it's all that's enabled mobile. If you look at the sort of power of mobile chipsets, they're using basically mobile chipsets now in the new range of Apple laptops, the
M1s,
and you look at what they're able to do and how much power that consumes. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So you sort of look at that and you go, really, what is a console versus what is mobile phones? Obviously, they're still more powerful, but the biggest difference really is the controller, and the size of the screen that you're looking at. I mean, that's really fundamentally the biggest difference. Is I can play styles of game far, far better using a controller than I could ever do on a mobile phone. And so that's really the distinction versus necessarily anything else. It's you can't. I wouldn't want to play. There's a whole class of games that I wouldn't want to play or use on a touchscreen. They're going to have been so diluted, or it's going to feel like you're playing the piano with boxing gloves on.
Yeah, I mean, I recently just purchased an M1 Apple iPad Pro for doing work, and the difference between that and just even a general laptop that the MacBook would typically make is above and beyond anything I've ever seen in the mobile space. And I think with M1 now, especially the fact that it has like a 4K screen or it has the whole OLED thing going as well. The mobile technology, I think, has just came so far in terms of leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. It's almost now getting to a point where I think, like you said, mobile games is now the almost the people to beat, because Apple Arcade came out a couple of years ago now, and that's also been doing great. And the fact that like you said, there's new hardware every year. But there was the thing even where like you've got guys like John Romero, right, who invented Doom, who built id Software, who started that whole thing. He now lives in Ireland, in Galway. I think he's now just announced he's making a brand new FPS. But then he just recently also completed the game with his son, where it was like almost a mobile game. It was a taco truck thing, but very basic, and appeal to again a mass audience. But even his tastes have changed, and if you're somebody like that who built the FPS genre is now moving to things like that, it's like like you said, the blur is happening where like console and PC games and mobile, it's all just becoming one entity almost.
Well, I mean, if you actually just think about games as being interactive entertainment, and don't sort of bracket it any more finely than that, then anything where you're interacting with something is a game. An interacting. So that's the type of games we make. And when I was working in the realm of console games and third-person action shooters, action adventures, and so on, everyone in the industry, everyone, my sort of peers and other sort of companies in the doing similar things, we looked at Bejeweled and so on, and it was effectively looked down upon as being, it's not a game, it's that game, and of course it's a game, and people enjoy playing it, and they do they have largely similar responses to playing it that people play in a hardcore RTS or FPS or whatever are going to have. It's not maybe as passionate, it's maybe not, it's not people that playing mobile games. A lot of them, the vast majority of them, don't self-identify as a gamer. If you met them in the street, are you a gamer? It's like saying to someone, "Are you a movier? Are you a booker?" It's just like, no, it's just something I do. I enjoy it. It's something I do, and I think that we have to sort of just look at the fact that this is an incredibly positive thing for the games industry and for games in general, because it means that in a few years, pretty much everyone on the planet will enjoy playing games of one form or another, and that's just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these things. I think it was somebody had put it in a Facebook meme or some kind of funny picture where they were talking about how we would be the first generation of people who would retire, of granddads and grandmas who have consoles and video games because it was part of their life growing up, which is crazy to me. I mean, when I was born, in '85, it's like the industry was just becoming, it was just exploding. It was like the Big Bang, and I was playing my NES back in the day, Legend of Zelda when I was 5 years old, and you look at even how Zelda's came, full circle now with Breath of the Wild, and how that's, now one of the best games ever reviewed and has 10 out of 10 scores everywhere, and, is an incredible experience. And it's a weird place to be in the world where games are relatively new, have only been about for, 30, 40 years. And if you look at the film industry 100 years ago, and how that was set up and how that run out of Hollywood, and now where they are now, it's like, it's crazy to think where the game industry would go, not even just the next 10 years, but the next 50 years, right? Because now we have stuff like VR, AR,
No, it's the thing. I think there was a moment in time about 15 years ago where I think people just thought that they knew what games were and that it was going to be, just bigger budget versions of FPSs and RTSs and whatever. And that it would be, you'd have a console, you'd get, a new version of some optical media that, would be delivered on and so on. And I think there was just this kind of sort of complacency about that kind of, well, this is what the games industry is going to be like. In the same way that the movie industry, outside of going to adding sound, going to color, arguably having a bit of a dabble with 3D, is technologically was for the vast majority of the time exactly the same. A bulb with a sheet of celluloid flying in front of it 24 times a second. It was very little in the way of change, and I think that we kind of thought, well, this is a business model. This is people go to shops to buy games on some format, and they play them on their device, whether it's a PC or console at home. And then, of course, none of this. Now games are free.
Yeah.
Games are free. They're played by pretty much everyone, anywhere, at all times. They're not product; they're services.
Yes.
I mean, it's entirely different. So that the thought that what we've seen in the last 34 years, that there's not much more to come or whatever. It's like, no. We're still barely scratching the surface. It's I think 5 years is hard to try and forecast. Never mind 20 or 40.
Yeah, I mean, even when people had that whole mass appeal when Spielberg done Ready Player One, and people were starting to look at, like, could this be the future of games? Is this where we're going to go? Is the whole virtual reality thing going to take over? And I think it's obviously a lot more dystopian and far fetched when you look at the film. But I mean, the way, even because like we talk about console generations, you look at how quickly Meta has now pushed Oculus, or Meta Oculus, or whatever the name is at the time. But VR is now becoming to a point where, the fact that the Quest 2 as a mobile space had the whole unit within the headset, so people didn't have to worry about the computer, the wires, all that kind of stuff. So that was another leap to consumers. And now, of course, they guys are planning the next thing, the next iteration. Even introducing AR as a comparison or companion to the VR headset. So I mean, that's incredible as well, right?
VR has taken a long time to get here.
Yeah.
I mean, the first, it's been, I don't know how many tries this is now.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do really, the games industry added massive resource to initiatives around CPU, GPU, and the development of technologies, sort of those enabling technologies. And similarly, so people are sitting in cars or TVs, all this stuff benefit from games from years ago when there was lots of money in there driving research and development. So I think Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, the other competitors back in the day, were pouring so much money into accelerating the speed, power, more power. And that's just benefited everyone, so everything's benefited from that. And again, games are driving, mobile. So all of the fact that you can get fanless laptops delivering mad, power and battery life, that of course then just translates directly into VR. So VR is now riding on two sets of coattails. That miniaturization, display technologies have gone through. Again, so it just means that yes, that's really going to come as it's the expression. It's slow until it's quick, and it's been slow, and now it's about to get quick. And certainly the Quest 2, I think definitely you're at the point now where you're going, I can start seeing a lot of people getting this rather than it being early adopters and enthusiasts and so on.
Yeah. No, I had the the Vive back in the day when Valve launched it, and it was the whole like 20 wires coming at the back of my head, and I haven't so many feet within the computer. But when the Quest 2 hit, the fact I could play it in my garden, run about, it's like it was a crazy comparison. But I think like you said, with the whole thing with going from slow to quick is definitely. I mean, even people I know who work within the fitness industry are seeing a whole comparison of like there's a sector there where people can actually now work out at home, especially during the pandemic, right? You can work out in a studio home, you can work out doing virtual workouts, but within VR. And that was an exciting thing. Beat Saber, of course, has been one of the biggest downloads, I think, on the Quest for forever, and that also now is something people are using to work out and see in a more social state.
DDR, Dance Revolution.
Yeah, mixed with Guitar Hero in a sense or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think even the fact that Angry Birds launched a game of that not too long ago, and I actually hadn't played Angry Birds on my phone for a long, long time, but playing it in VR and physically being able to pull the slingshot back and fire birds. That was a whole. It's I mean, it reintroduced gaming to me. VR.
No, there's definitely a magical quality to it, and the difficulties that you have in terms of eye strain and motion sickness for some people, and actually just holding devices on your head that were heavier for that long. There's things that are detrimental to wanting to do it that often. But as these just get those issues get refined and ultimately disappear, then then you still have the issue of putting yourself into effectively a vulnerable place when you're in VR, which is you're locking yourself away from everyone else. So it's distinct from sitting with your phone playing a game on the mobile while you're sitting with your spouse or loved one. You can get away with that.
Of course.
You can be watching the TV and you can still be playing a game there. But putting the headset on,
wheel your arms about.
It's a very different experience. So I think there's always going to be a little bit more of a limit on how widespread usage of VR will be, just by virtue of the fact that it is sort of really antisocial, at least in the meat space. Obviously, it can be very social in the VR space.
Yeah, I think the future of that also might be more AR than VR, because I know that people can put on just a pair of glasses, and see different things moving about their living room. That's obviously, again, because you're bringing almost people into that experience as well, because they're sitting next to you. But
I think AR's got a far wider potential than VR.
Yeah, definitely. I think even some of the patents I've seen coming out, the Apple were more primarily focused on that than VR. I think they also had some version of a glass they were introducing that would work in comparison with the iPhone. So, I mean, there's a whole thing there, but who knows? I mean, I think that was it this year. I think even last year we were getting to a point where they didn't announce anything with Oculus last year. They announced a couple of games and some different meta spaces, but there was nothing in terms of hardware moving forward again. But I think this year, this conference this year, it's supposed to be that they're announcing the next kind of phase of Oculus. So I'm excited to see whatever that's going to be. So yeah. So again, with Outplay, going back to your guys, I mean, you're again working within the mobile space, and you're working within what we'd say would be casual gameplay, but I suppose in a sense, is there a sense that hub that you have now is going to expand at any point? Do you guys think you're going to be in venture back outside of Dundee? Do you think there'll be any chance of opening sister studios again?
Yeah, I mean, we acquired a studio down in England in 2016 called Apexel Square, and they're down in Derby, and we ultimately ended up selling the studio to Miniclip in March 2020, just as the world was going to hell in a handbasket. But certainly either acquiring other studios that are doing similar kinds of games, or games for a similar audience, is definitely something that we're looking at, and opening up a studio, elsewhere would be something, we've had, Richard and I and quite a few of the people in the leadership team at Outplay have had experience of working in multi-site environments. So having, an Outplay somewhere else, isn't inconceivable. It's not currently on the plans, but, somewhere, I would, somewhere in the EU would probably be, a sensible place to,
Right.
to then have a foot back in there. From a talent perspective, being
Of course. Yeah. Is that a thing also you don't have to touch on it too much, but I'm just wondering with now Brexit having happened, 5 or 6 years ago or however long, I'm trying to put it in my memory as much as I can now at this point, but like, has
there
that...
There was a vote and then there was...
Of course there was a vote. Did you feel that that's affected Outplay in a sense? Like, because obviously you're sourcing talent, within Europe as well. So has that caused an issue or?
No, I mean, it's, yes. I mean, fundamentally, yes. I think, I'm fairly candid about this. I think it was a dreadful idea to begin with. And it's gone on to demonstrate that it was a dreadful idea. But in terms of how it's affected Outplay, thankfully, unlike many businesses, we've not run into the sort of bureaucracy and red tape around import and export, which is we've not run into supply chain issues. There's a whole host of other Brexit related terrible things that we've thankfully dodged completely. Most of our revenue comes from the US. There's just, and we're not exporting anything, we're not importing anything. So,
of course.
So we've been very insulated in that regard. But ultimately, it means that it presents more friction to find people that want, if people wanted to live in Dundee before or Scotland, maybe now it's not less attractive.
Yeah.
It's definitely way less problematic for us than it has been for huge numbers of other businesses and industries. But it's not made anything better.
I mean, that's what that was the whole promise, was that things were going to be smoother and it was going to be less friction and people were going to have to worry about certain things. But of course, that's just been the complete opposite, right? It's caused more and more friction. Like you said, the game sector's probably been the one that's maybe dodged maybe the most, because you're just maybe dealing specifically with people. Like if you're dealing with haulage or anything with import, food, drugs, chemicals, it's been a nightmare in the UK. So yeah, definitely. Anyway, I mean, talking about Outplay in general, I mean, the one thing I would say is that, if people are interested in finding more about Outplay, where are you kind of like located? What's the kind of things you do for outreach now? Like, how do people get involved with the company if they want to? Is it just purely through the website and social media?
Yeah, I mean, those are the sort of two main. We've got LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, your usual suspects. We're pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of talking about what the company's up to. We tend to focus more off content that's maybe of interest to industry types on the LinkedIn page rather than the Facebook, which is more sort of consumer facing. But we've got a new website in development, which will be way better than the one we currently have. We've recently updated the Outplay website and it has got some more content there. We have done and continue to do sort of outreach with the universities and schools around locally. We've run in the past that became sort of it was impossible for quite a while. We'd actually we'd get people up from different industries.
Right.
I had like one of the person from Ironman Animation come up and do a claymation-y sort of modeling
in a workshop thing.
But that was not only for Outplayers, it was for other people interested in the sort of local universities, in education or in other companies. So we do a fair amount of women in games, game industry, inclusion and diversity efforts. So there's a lot of sort of progressive sort of causes that we're involved with. These are very closely in some cases.
Yeah, fantastic. that's great. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I'll leave all of your links and social media stuff for Outplay down below. If the guys who are listening want to check it out, yeah, I'll leave that all so you guys can reach out if you want to either work there or check out the stuff that they do. But yeah, I mean, definitely Outreach and Mize is one of the best companies in not only the Scottish region but the UK as well. I think for an independent developer and also mobile developers. So
thank you very much.
Welcome.
We try.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm sure it's been a trying time, but yeah, definitely it's been worth it to get you on and have a wee chat about the industry and just what you think. It's always great to just, shoot the shit, as I say, about just the industry in general and tech and the whole industry. It's always great just to have another mind on that kind of thinks in a similar pattern. So yeah, thanks very much for coming on, Doug.
No, that's been great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not at all. If you guys have listened to this point, thanks again for tuning in. If you have any questions for Doug or for Outplay, you can leave them below. I'll try and forward them on if I can. And again, I'll leave all the information in below if you want to contact them directly. And if you have any suggestions for anybody else you'd want to have on, I might even talk to Doug after the fact and see if we can get any of his art team on here at one point. It might be interesting as well. But yeah, definitely thanks for listening. If you guys want to check it out on the podcast in different areas, we're on iTunes, Spotify, we're on YouTube as well. You can see our pretty faces, as I always say. And hopefully you enjoyed the episode. My thanks to you for listening. Thanks to Doug for coming on. And we'll see you guys in a future episode. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.